All right, welcome back, guys. Today we're going to do our tenons on our front rail. Okay, to do that I have a front rail here, and the first thing I'm going to do is label which of these faces I want to be my front face, just like we did on our side and back rails. So I'm going to label this one here as the face. Okay, so my face, when I orient it on this tenon cutting jig, is always going to go against the fence. All right, let's set this thing up. First thing we need to do is set the blade height for 5/8 of an inch, because our tenon height is actually 5/8 of an inch. All right, so we're going to set that up, and I've actually already gone ahead. I'm actually going to tune this up just a hair. Okay, so our blade height is set at 5/8 of an inch. Next thing I'm going to do is double check this jig just to make sure that it's set square. This is really important. So first I want to make sure that my fence is square to the table. And it's actually pretty decent. I'm actually going to loosen this and tweak it just a hair. There we go. Okay, now we're set right on square. I also want to make sure that this backstop here is set square to the table as well. And we're looking pretty good there. Okay, so now my jig is set, my blade height is set. I'm going to draw out exactly what I'm doing here. So from the face, I want to have my tenon start 1/4 inch from the front face. My tenon is also going to be 1/4 inch thick, and I'm going to end up with waist on the back. Now, we need to understand here that this is waist and this is waist. So my blade for my first cut needs to be in this waist area here. Okay, for the second cut, our waist is on the opposite side of the tenon. So because my offset for the tenon is 1/4 inch, I want to measure from the fence, and I'm going to loosen this locking nut here and crank here and adjust the fence so that I have 1/4 inch measured to the outside of the blade. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm measuring from the fence right here to the outside of the blade, and that makes sure that this blade is within the waist area of my cut. Okay, face against the fence, and I'm going to make sure that this is fully down on the table, and just give that a little snug there, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this. Okay, nice and slow and smooth. Now I can, with the same setup here, I'm going to cut all of my first cuts on all of my front rails. Okay, so we'll flip that, making sure that my face is still against the fence. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to make our first cut on all of our front rails, and once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and make the second cut. So our second cut is, here we go. So our first cut was measured 1/4 inch to the outside of the blade. This time I'm going to measure 1/2 inch to the inside of the blade so that my waist is on the opposite side. So for my second cut now, I'm going to readjust the offset of this fence, and we're going to measure 1/2 inch this time to the inside of the blade. And I'm looking pretty good right there. Okay, so we've measured 1/2 inch from the fence to the inside of the blade this time. All right, so still with our face against the fence, we're going to go ahead and make our second cheek cut. right, and there we have our cheat cuts made to define our tenons. Okay, so now that we've got our cheat cuts made and we've defined where our tenon is on the rail, now we've got to make our shoulder cuts and take out these bits of waste here. So to do that, I need to first adjust my blade so that the blade is just to the underside of my tenon. Okay, so just rock it back and forth just a hair, and my tooth is just coming up right there to the bottom side of my tenon. Okay? We're going to use a parallel jaw clamp, and we're going to use this as a stop block to make sure that all of these rails end up exactly the same. We're going to position this, just going to tap that back. Right there, so that the saw blade is right on defining a tenon that's going to be 5/8 of an inch long. And I'll clamp down my stop block. Alright, so here we go. Okay, so there's the first cut. We cut that on both sides of the face. Now we're going to flip this thing over, and this is actually going to be a saw height adjustment here because this shoulder cut is going to be deeper than the first cut that we made. All right, the stop block is not going to change. So we're just going to raise this blade up again so that the blade is just scraping the underside of the tenon right there. And we're going to go ahead and make the same cuts using the stop block in the same location. And there we go. So now we have our shoulder cuts defined here by our crosscut sled. Okay, the last part of cutting these tenons, we have to define the actual height of the tenon in this direction. Now, this is your chance to fine-tune if you've maybe put these mortises in the wrong location, just ever so slightly on the leg. I've already done the first two here. The very top front rail, you need to make sure that you position this so that the top of the leg and the top of the rail are flush, and then mark and create your tenon wherever that ends up. The second one defines the bottom of the drawer, defines the drawer height. So this measurement here is going to be exactly 4 inches. Okay, so from the bottom of this rail to the top of this rail is 4 inches. So you're going to put a little mark, and then you're going to just chip away at that tenon to make this rail sit exactly in that location. The door on the bottom is going to be exactly at 12 inches. So this is the one we're going to make. So I'm going to put my ruler here. From the underside of this rail to the top side of the bottom rail is 12 inches, and I'm just going to put a little pencil mark exactly at 12 inches. Okay, so then I can take my rail, again with my face in the outward direction, and at this point I'm now making custom fit joints, right? So I've actually labeled this first one A and A on the leg, and this one can be B and B. These are designed to fit only in this location. Okay, so these rails are no longer interchangeable. We're going to make this one C and C. Okay, so I'm going to just line my rail up with my mortise. and I'm gonna put a little mark. Actually, I'll do it here so you guys can see. I'm just gonna line it up with this mark at 12 inches that I've made here, and I'm just gonna put a little mark on the tenon right where the mortise actually lies in the leg. And that gives me my layout for where I need to chip away this tenon so that it fits with the rail in the perfect height. Okay, so here we go. So now I'm going to use my hold down, my hold fast. Give that thing a pop. Take a nice sharp chisel. Really quick about chisel safety. 2 rules. Our work always has to be held down, and we never want any body part in front of the chisel. All right, so we're always going to be having, don't put your fingers in front of the chisel. It is, however, okay to have your fingers very close to the edge as long as they're behind. This way you actually get some really good chisel control. I'm first going to do a downward chop along this tenon, so I'm going to hold the chisel with the back edge of the blade right against the shoulder of the tenon, and I'm just going to give that thing a couple of knocks, and I can take the chisel, just lever that waist out. Okay, actually I'm almost right down to my line there. What I'm going to do now is I'm just actually going to what we call back cut, and I'm actually going to go slightly inward on an angle here just to make sure that the rail's going to bottom out right tight against that joint. Just do another little chop. And I'm just going to come right down to my layout line. Okay, give that thing a whack on the back, and we're going to go over. Now you guys can actually see what I'm doing here. My next layout line is actually quite a bit deeper than the first one. So same action. We're going to chop down right at the shoulder of this tenon, and just take it out little bits at a time. You don't want to try to remove too much, it just makes a mess. Little bits at a time. And we're probably one more. We're almost down to our line. That looks pretty good. We're just going to back cut this ever so slightly. And let's test it. Okay. There we go. There we have a nice tight fit, and it's actually, it's just the right amount of snugness. If it's too tight, you need to take a little off there, because when you fill that with glue, when we put glue on these cheeks of this tenon, it's going to feel like it gets a little bit tighter. Alright, so that's just actually where we want to be. We've done it right. These are going to come up nice and flush. We can double check and make sure we're right on 12 inches so that we're going to have a 12-inch spacing for our door. And that's it.